Mr. Sullivan.
Captain Jackson.
There we go. That's right. I forgot. Sorry. In this time, Major Sullivan.
Major Sullivan. But these are fluid. These are fluid titles. We may be heading both for top command pretty soon.
We may get field promotions. Yeah.
That's right. Those not prepared for this adventure may fall to the wayside. They may be left behind.
Dan, are you observing what's happening?
I love it.
Safe from your cocoon in the beaches?
Well, I'm adventurous. I go out for walks. I walk along the boardwalk. I've made shopping trips,
Oh my!
And behind enemy lines.
Oh my!
Yeah. I still drop down to Yorkville and I go to Pussyterry's. Pussyterry's right on that. And so they're always stocked up. They've not been short of anything over these days. So I have
it made national news that Mayor Ford was very vocal in his displeasure at Pussyterry's pricing practices for their Purell and items that are disinfectant things. They were selling stuff for gouging prices, as he said.
Yeah, well, you don't go to Pussyterry's for that type of product,
Exactly.
That's not.
Maybe he's not familiar with their everyday walking around prices. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like complaining about the Rolls-Royce dealer, how much they charge to change the tires on your Ford.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean all the supermarkets are stocked with the toilet paper and the disinfectants and everything else. People aren't paying for a lot of other things right now, so maybe there's some extra change that they can use to pay extra. And but it's really interesting. I want to tell you about a little incident because it kind of puts the two extremes that people are actually experiencing right now. So I'm going down to the supermarket. This was on Friday. And Babs has some things she wants me to pick up. And so I make my way. Nice day, sunny. I'm walking along, and all of a sudden, somebody shouts my name, and I turn around. And fortunately, my random access memory was really good at that moment because I instantly remembered this person, even though he had not been in the program for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I remembered this person. The very distinctive voice, and that one was right at the top, so I was able to retrieve it. And I said, "Oh, how you doing?" And we were chatting, and he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Well, full time with Coach. We're making the adjustments necessary to increase our value creation because we're limited to virtual right now, so we don't have our workshops going." So, Oh, you're still working, yeah? And I said, well, working, yes. Technically, yes. and I said, what about you? He says, I feel completely useless. He says, and really, really interesting. Great. I won't mention his name on air, but you would know him the moment I tell you who it is, because he was in the real estate industry in Toronto, and you would have come across him. And anyway, we were chatting there, and he said, he says, I don't know what's going to happen here. And I said, well, there's lots of people out there doing great things besides ourselves. You try to, you just try to design each day that you're creating more value, you're being more useful to other people. But it was very, very interesting because I could tell that I hadn't cheered him up. But I had to go on, and so I walked down to the supermarket, and very, very interesting, just how one particular store is not adjusting to the times. They had no baskets or carts. Okay, so Pussyterry's has baskets and carts, and Whole Foods has baskets and carts. And they have one person whose job it is to, when someone's used the cart, to wipe it down and have it ready for a new customer. So I was only able to buy what I could carry. And I said, this is not a smart business decision. I said, surely if you hire one person and just have them on staff to be providing baskets and carts for people, they'll buy more when they're in the store, because you buy as much as you can possibly fill your basket with.
Right.
Especially during these times, right? Like that. And so anyway, I have an armful, and I go up, and they have 3 lines. They have a cash only line, and then they have a debit and credit line, and then one that wasn't in an operation, which was debit and credit. And a young guy comes, he says, I'll open up for you on debit and credit. So I go, and I said, very, very interesting. He says, yeah, he says, I just got off cash, and we're only allowed to be on cash for 1 hour during an 8-hour shift. And, so because people are using cash, and cash has been fingered and handled, where with debit and credit,
right.
No, there's no handling. And he said, he said, I just started. He said, they've been asking more and more people to come in because they've extended their hours. They have senior only hours now, which I think is kind of a neat thing, nice adjustment. And everything. And I said, well, good for you. And he says, yeah. He says, it's better than sitting at home. He says, something useful to do. And he says, we're everybody's really top morale here. We're all really excited what we're doing. And I looked around, and they were all late teens. All the staff were late teens. And he says, yeah. He says, it's kind of exciting to be part of something like this, isn't it? And I said, yeah. I said, most of the time we've lived outside of history, and suddenly we're in history again. This is what happens when history is taking place, and you're part of it, I'm part of it, everybody else is part of it. But I was just contrasting a really positive interchange with this young person. And the guy I met on the street, who's in his 60s, probably pushing 70, and just the different in tone, different in difference in approach during this time.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? That these
it's just an anecdote from the front. This wasn't meant to be profound or anything. But,
no, exactly. But I'm saying we're seeing these things that we're seeing. I haven't been really outside. I live in a gated community, and I haven't left. I'm treating it like a island in the Caribbean.
Yeah,
just kind of like holed up in Necker Island here at the Four Seasons Valhalla, and luckily we don't need to leave. But from my front line of the observation, that what I'm seeing is just as we talked about last week, what I think is going to happen, and it's happening on a wider scale than I ever thought, is the migration to virtual gathering. And that this is going to be the greatest gift for everybody, in the sense of freed up time. That this is the thing that everybody has got now.
Freed up money too, too.
Yes, money and time. A freedom of this. That you look at what could be the economic impact of this going forward. That if we realize that, most people can work from home and not have any slip ups, or most meetings can be held online and effectively, and that all of these things that that the actual physical contact is non-essential or not really fundamentally adding to the qualitative experience of it, or the outcome experience of it, that's going to have a big impact, I think. Just because we're able to get the essence of what people want without all the heavy burden of all the stuff around it,
Yeah. I mean, you've always been advanced with this, Dean. Ever since I've known you, you've been kind of further up the mountain than I have been with your use of digital tools. I mean, and you're specializing in communications that can be done with a digital format, with digital networks, digital team. But in yourself, how have you been surprised yourself? Not so much about what's happening to the world, but what's happening to Dean as a result of this.
I just did this week the first breakthrough blueprint, and so as you know, I've been doing the small 12-person boardroom events for this June. Will be 8 years now, and that I've gone all over the world doing those events, and this period of time right here, from now till July 4th, I had 5 events scheduled that were 5 live events, including my summer tour in Toronto, London, Amsterdam. That those are all off the table now. So you can imagine that is that's a big swing economically in a big portion of income. Revenue gone from that can't happen now, but when I really started thinking about it, what is the essence of it? If I look at the live in-person element of it as the normal way that we've done it, what is the actual outcome that we're getting from this, right? There's no inherent value in being in person. There's no, we're not touching anybody, or there's nothing magical about that. What it is that we've just become accustomed to the way that we spend sort of bulk time together is in person, because we haven't had the capability to digitize an experience that kind of matches it, And so, just like 20 years ago, the only way to read text was physically printed out on paper, And when we figured out how to create digitized text and PDFs, that created a new way to distribute information, right? It was like just like the same level of and maybe even an exponential. It started the possibility of exponential delivery growth, just like the printing press created this renaissance of new ability to distribute printed information. And then a couple of years after we figured out how to digitize text, we got the capability to digitize sound. with the MP3. And that became now a new way and a better way to, exponentially distribute music, audio, sound, anything like that. Then a couple of years later, the MP4. We figured out how to digitize video. And then what we started to see is, as on the back of Moore's Law and the capabilities of processing the larger and larger data demands and the processing demands, we started seeing our ability to stream these kinds of things, right? Like YouTube. Remember, video was very pixelated and awkward and very sort of took a long time to download and buffer as we went through the growing pains of it. But now it's, we can seamlessly pick anything from Netflix, Hulu, any of the things, watch any piece of digital content instantly streaming with no buffering, it's not even an issue now, right? And I think that if we fast forward to what's happening right now, this is the last sort of, not the last, I always never say last, but this is the next movement from something that we would largely consider not digitizable, in-person meetings, that we're now digitizing intimacy. Intimacy in communicating, in being, proximity. I guess that's really what it is, right? Proximity and intimacy of being in a boardroom with people that, like, we're not going to replace romantic, we're not going to replace dating or intimate relationships or things where we're actually going to have physical contact with people. But let's face it, when we go to a boardroom or a meeting like that, we're not looking to have physical contact with anybody anyway, right? So if we can get the essence, the part of the meeting, the part of the gathering that is the central part, which is the crystal clear exchange of conversation and ideas and communication, in a way that once we get over the technological hiccups, like what we're seeing right now is people sort of getting used to the hardware and the tools to do this, not unlike people were getting used to, downloading a video player and downloading how to access video content. But as we start to see these, that everybody gets comfortable with it, and everybody realizes that, okay, it'd be a little better experience if I had a microphone, and that I had, so we're not getting this tinny, hollow room sound when you're communicating with people, that if people have a microphone and have headphones or whatever right now, that it becomes a very intimate experience. And I had the firsthand experience of it this week with our Breakthrough Blueprint. We had people from Las Vegas, from the United States, from Brussels, from Belgium, from Bangkok, all in a room where it felt like we were all in the same space. We had amazing conversations. We had a great experience. And whenever we took a break for lunch or at the end of the day, we're in our own bubble. We're in our own environment.
Yeah.
And I just think, Dan, the freedom, the excess capacity that's going to free up for us as a society of all this time. I think I may have shared with you that, I did the math on a breakthrough blueprint, just even a local one for me here in Orlando. I go and stay at Celebration where I do the event, that I would have to leave my house at 4:00 on Sunday to get to the hotel, check in. We have a little gathering on Sunday evening, and then I'd spend 3 days in full immersion, going in the boardroom and lunches and whatever, and then drive home and back to my bubble. And it was a 75-hour time lapse from the moment I leave my bubble to the time I get back. And now with this situation, my total time in the thing was 12 hours of being and all that 75 hours was really to get 18 or 20 hours of in the boardroom time,
Yeah, right.
And so I just think that what people are going to do with that time, especially when you start realizing that how much inefficiency there is in being in physical proximity to people. Like, you just think, I don't know that that's going to hold up, I think I'm going to see that people are not going to put up.
Here's what I believe about this is that there's the most disruptive force in the world, and I've said this several times, the most disruptive force in the world are consumers, unpredictable consumers with a new capability. So, and my sense is that for every 3 or 4 or 5 shifts that we see, just because of what we're about, what you and I do personally and what we do, from a standpoint, my life hasn't really shifted that much because I do a lot of digital work all the time. Yeah. Anyway, what's shifted is that I'm not doing the in-person work. Okay.
Right.
But apart from that, like, I'm in a break period right now where I wouldn't be doing workshops anyway.
Right.
During this week. So the only difference is that I'm not going to the office. I'm not being in the cafe. I'm not going down to the recording studios, but I'm still doing exactly the same activities. I mean, I was doing digital activities. So people said, boy, this is quite a shift. And I said, well, not really. I said, I mean, I like you and influenced by yourself and others who are digital pioneers. Mike Koenig's, I talk a lot to Mike Koenig's do here, and Joe does a lot of digital work and everything like that. I said, it's not so much of a shift. And I said, but what's different is the full engagement of what's happening on the other end. And I said, basically, I was doing a lot of digital work. I just didn't have a big audience on the other end for it. And what I've noticed in the last week or two, there's about a 10 times, 100 times bigger audience for receiving what I'm creating. Now, I'll give you an example. Carrie Oberbrunner, who is I have a collaboration with him because Carrie has really figured out the Audible universe, and he's got 39,000 Audible platforms that he can start with just a 1-hour interview with you, and immediately, in a matter of, digital minutes, that message, whatever you did, is on 39,000 Audible platforms. So tomorrow, he's going to interview me on the handout that I created and have now updated called Scary Times Success Manual, which was put out right after 9/11. Then we upgraded it a little bit for the 08-09 financial, the financial downturn, the recession. And then we pulled it out again and made a few tweaks and handed it out. And we're over 1 million in the first 12 days, 1 million downloads of new people. These would be new people, 1 million downloads of it. And then Shannon Waller and I started doing podcasts on the 10 strategies, and we did 2 of them, 45 minutes each, where in one we go deeper in strategies 1 through 5, and then we go deeper in the second 45 minutes with strategies 6 through 10. And now we're going for 45 minutes on each of the strategies, and we're putting those out. So Kerry contacts us on Thursday, and he says, look, I have a webinar with 15,000 individuals on Monday, and he said, I wonder if you'd do a Facebook Live with me, Dan, for an hour, where we're just going to go through the Scary Times Success Manual. And I said, absolutely. And he says, and then I'll put that on our 39,000 audibles. And I said, that's great. And he said, I've heard that, he says, and I've actually received 2 of the podcasts, and can we set up a landing page where for the 39,000 Audible platforms, they can go right to your platform, and as the ongoing podcast, the deep dive podcast that I'm doing on each of the 12 strategies, he says, we'll connect you with that. And I said, that's great. Now, start to finish, that was a 10-minute phone conversation, and he's creating this massive capability. Now, on some of those platforms, there are subscription money that comes back from that. And the way I do it with Kerry, I said, well, all the money that comes back from your vast universe of audibles, any money comes back from my stuff out there, well, that's your money. I said, you're the keeper of that part of my capability universe, so you should get all the money. I said, I do one thing here, and it happens 1 million times out there, so you should keep all the money. And it's really, really interesting how I've adjusted, because I'm just a content creator. I'm like,
right.
Kind of both of us are dual purpose. We're context and content. We're mainly what we communicate is context. This is how to look at something. And by the way, here's some content to show you how to specifically apply this. Once you understand the big picture, then here's the actual specific what to do, the action, but application, everything else. But that was just and then I've got a real whopper I want to tell you about. I'd like to go back over to some new things you're thinking about doing now that you are freed up time-wise. You are freed up. You don't have to get on planes. You don't have to even leave your driveway. You don't. You're lonely Tesla. You're lonely Tesla. Here I am, the greatest breakthrough in automobile history, and what's he doing with me? What's he doing with me? I've been taking out trash to our garage, and the Tesla is saying, "Oh, did you come from?" No, just delivering trash. Don't you worry yourself.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. I
just
took
electric.
It out one.
Just
it's been out one time.
Just make sure you're up to full charge, and don't get complacent here. Just make sure you don't know when you'll be called on.
I could go 320 miles if I wanted to.
You could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. I'm my mind, Dan, is so I had that confirmation for the
and we're starting coach this year. This on Friday we're starting with our first actual coach workshop on digital. So we'll see about that.
So is that the plan that you're going to actually do the workshop digitally where people can come?
I'm sorry, my security clearance doesn't go that high that I could answer that question. I'm told when to show up. I'm told how to show up. I'm told what to do when I do show up. This is all being planned by our intelligence teams and everything like that. But we have 2-hour sprints. We have 2-hour sprints. So we take one concept, send it out as a PDF, writable PDF, and then I show a filled-in version of the tool, just like in the real-time workshops. And then I also put together a 10 to 15 minute video where I talk about the context of the tool and then what we're going to do with the tool when we actually get together on Zoom.
Yeah. So I think that's fantastic, Dan. And that, when you really think about it, that this is going to, I think, open up a new possibility. Like, I think that I'm really thinking about it differently. I'm thinking about it as the active ingredients, right? So I think about, if you think about what's required when I do a breakthrough blueprint, the active ingredient, the thing that makes it work, the thing that they're there for, is the actual time in the boardroom. And so those number of hours, right? Now, if we can take just those hours and eliminate all of the filler, all of the thing where you can get from concentrate, the valuable part, or I don't want to say valuable, but the active ingredients, that opens up a whole new world. And so you think about what I'm thinking is looking at how it all plays out, to be able to maximize those hours. And I have real evidence.
I think it's I'm thinking back the historical period that I've really studied, trying to understand, what we're living through right now. The period that I have studied most is about 150 years after Gutenberg. So Gutenberg, the year number that's generally given for the introduction of the movable type printing. It's not printing. I mean, people say, well, he invented print. Well, there was printing in parts of the world. I mean, China had printing, at least 1,000 years before Gutenberg. But his big thing was that he could create a complete page with movable type. He had, the different letters of the alphabet.
Right.
And he was actually a goldsmith, so he was used to melding and pouring metal into molds. So he just created molds, and wouldn't be using gold. He'd be using, probably copper in those days, or iron, and he would melt it, and then he would have the movable. He had, 100 A's, 100 B's, 100 C's, and then he just construct sentences, and then he could show someone how to do it, and they have to do it backwards, so, even in the 1950s, my sister married a man who was a typesetter, and he could do really remarkably fast, how fast he could do a whole page of type.
I remember even getting started. I remember in the 80s, Letraset. That was I remember using some Letraset things to lay out.
Oh yeah. I've done my hours of Letrasetting, and but the interesting thing about it, the number of impacts. One is Gutenberg would not have been possible. He wouldn't have had the impact if there hadn't been the Black Death, which was the greatest plague ever to hit Europe and England. So this was a pandemic of historic proportions, and 1/3 of all Europeans died over a period of about 5-6 years. And it just utterly put society on its head. I mean, the collapse of social structures, work structures, cultural structures, everything two armies would set off to fight each other, and they would never meet because half of each army had fallen sick or died on the way to to the encounter. I mean, it just changed everything. But the big thing is that there was this huge abundance of leftover clothing of the people who had died.
Wow.
Okay, so for the first time, some people just had one set of clothes or two set of clothes, but if you died, that was extra set. And all of a sudden, that fabric could be converted to paper. Because up until that time, it was very expensive, and a lot of printing was actually on parchment and was hand. Yeah. You had scribes who were gifted at animal skins basically, and but all of a sudden, and that paper is really durable because Shakespeare, when you get to Shakespeare, which is 120, 130 years after Gutenberg, Shakespeare, his prints, the folios, as they're called, they're in the British Museum. You can go and see them. And that paper is really, really durable, and it's 500 years old and everything. So without that pandemic 100 years before, there wouldn't have been the paper to actually propel Gutenberg's breakthrough. And then the other thing was that everybody, reading of books used to have been a public activity with one person reading and a lot of people listening. And first of all, not many people read, because what was the point of reading? Mm-hmm. And what happened was all of a sudden people could get books and they could go off by themselves. Okay, and this is a huge social change, people getting books and going off by themselves and essentially having a conversation with the author of the book. Okay, so, and there's a lot of thinking that what happened as a result of this, and this is the one I'm taking a look here, this experience of being at home, but actually being able to talk to anyone in the world that you want to, like you're doing with Breakthrough Blueprint. You span the globe with your first attempt with a virtual. And but you had a break, and you slept in your bed, and you didn't. You had no need to go out, and that's a cultural and social shift. But I think it's a consciousness shift, and a lot of people think that the whole notion of actually seeing ourselves as individuals, as separate individuals, and this is in human history on a wide-scale basis, was entirely triggered by people having books that they could off by themselves and virtually have a conversation. And at first, people would mouth the words, and people would read to themselves out loud. Yeah. And so, but there was no one else. Here they were talking, but there was no one in the room with them. Nobody was talking. And then gradually people learned how to read without actually mouthing the words, and I can still see some people, even today, they'll be reading and their lips will be moving. There's no sound will be coming out, but their lips will actually be moving. So we're not that far away from the point where people actually read to themselves out loud. And I suspect at the same time they started, asking questions out loud of the author and then doing it. And but so it's Shakespeare who shows the change, because he's the first person in human history. I mean, if you go back to storytelling in human history, where there are records of the storytelling, he's the first one who has characters on stage talking to themselves. Hamlet talks to himself. Lady Macbeth talks to herself. He's got all these characters, and they're talking to you, but they're having a conversation with themselves in front of the audience. As if the audience isn't there. And Freud, 300 or 400 years later, he said that Shakespeare shows that a new modern human being has emerged from being literate, from having books and talking to themselves. But Shakespeare is the changeover narrator. He's the one who creates narratives where this is proven in front of you now that human beings can have conversations with themselves. Some of the greatest conversations, in literature are in Shakespeare's plays. So so I'm sitting back here and I said, well, there's the things that we can see from the standpoint of comfort, convenience, time saving, labor saving and everything. But I'm also paying attention to the consciousness shift, I think there's, we're not going to go back to normal that we had a month ago. We're not going back.
No.
We'll establish a new normal, but it'll be very different from the normal we left a month ago.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think that that's really the thing, that one of the, we'll call it casualties or one of the reductions of that will be unnecessary gatherings like this, like that it's not truly essential. Like you would agree, nobody's going to argue yet that being at a live concert or a musical experience or something like that is can be recreated digitally. But I think it'll open up to better. There'll be other alternative experiences.
Yeah. I think new things, entirely new forms. Yeah, I had a conversation because we're talking about the virtual conversation or virtual workshops that we're planning to do. And there's a bit of nervousness in our team that experiencing the virtual, they'll never again want to do live. And I said, well, that's a theory to be tested. That's a theory to be, I said, that's a theory. And I said, because my reading on, for example, entertainment forms, you go back to 1900, and almost all entertainment's live. It's one-offs and it's live theater, music. It's all, it's all live.
It's just a matter of time. I think it's a matter of time.
They introduce recordings, and everybody says, well, nobody will ever go to a concert.
Right.
Well, quite frankly, there's more concerts than there ever was before. I mean, all you have to do is read the entertainment, live concerts and everything else, and almost unlimited number of recorded concerts that you have. And then movies come in, and people say, "Well, you'll never go to plays again." Well, there's never been so many plays, in the world at one time, and movies beyond count. Same thing with, same thing with television. Television will eliminate movies. Well, actually, people do both. And then live stream, well, that'll eliminate television. Well, actually, people do both. So my feeling is nothing ever replaces completely existing thing. It shifts the way you do the existing thing. But so, and I said, so here's the thing. When we get to the point where we can have live strategic coach workshops again, and we were up to 125 workshop days a quarter when we shut down. I said they'll come, and I said there'll be a lag. I mean, we won't go back to 100% right off the bat. But here's the thing: they're going to want both now. They'll want their quarterly live workshop, and they'll want all the stuff we've been doing in between now. They'll want both. They'll want both of them, and it'll allow us to redesign our workshops, our live workshops, and allow us to redesign how we're using the digital, because we'll now see them as a combined experience. There's two sides to these. So that's like my books. My books have text. My books have cartoons. My books have audio. My books have visual. I've got 4 combined.
Now we need is live readings in person by the author.
Yeah.
Hey, what was when studying the Gutenberg? what was the transition when was the inflection point that people decided, hey, I could write a book? Like, my ideas could be spread now. When was that? Like, I imagine that it was very rare to have something published. I mean, it was probably reserved for elites and people who had the
and it took people a while to get. Yeah, it took people a while to get the thing, but actually it went commercial really fast. So, for example, 1455 by 1480, 1455 by probably 1490, there were 30,000 printing presses in Northern Europe. They all came in Northern Germany, Scandinavia, the Low Countries like Holland, Netherlands, what's now Belgium, Denmark, and all those things. And interesting enough, two aspects of that. First of all, that was a big trade. That was a big trade area. There was a trade network that went all the way from London to a city in Russia, right across the north of Europe. At one time, there were 23 different city-states that actually were part of this trade, and they had certain rules. They had letters of credit. They had UN-charged tariffs, and everything else. It was like a early free trade zone. It was called the Hanseatic League. Hanseatic League. And that's where the printing presses, and they were printing contracts, they were printing rules, they were printing, regulations and everything else. So a lot of the first printing went right into the commercial sector, and it was used for business contracts especially, and and probably advertisements. Probably they went into advertisements and. News, probably some newspapers. And what they did has folios, and a folio was a big broadsheet. So it would be like maybe 2 feet by 3 feet. It was a big broadsheet, and then it would be folded once, folded twice, folded 3 times, and and it would come out with 16 little pages if you folded
16 panels,
16 panels. How many? I think it's 3 folds to get the 16.
Okay.
And so they didn't really. It was like a pamphlet. You created a pamphlet, but there was no stitching, there was no stapling or anything,
right? And
everything like that. And then, but what the guy who really figured this out, he was kind of was Martin Luther. Martin Luther, Catholic monk. And, in Germany, who really is fed up with the corruption that's taking place in the Catholic Church at the upper levels. And it's all coming from Rome. The example is coming from Rome. And he said, it's about time somebody told everybody what's going on here. And he put out a document, which was, first of all, just a broadsheet. And he nailed it to a church door. His edicts, his edicts, and then he fast printed them and did them into pamphlets, and no Gutenberg, no printed edicts, no Martin Luther, no Protestantism. It would never have happened if that hadn't happened. Yeah, and everything else.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean, and there's nothing more disruptive in the world than an unpredictable consumer with a new capability.
Right. Yeah. Once somebody realizes, hey, you could do this. Like, I mean, it wasn't long before when YouTube became available that people started realizing, hey, I could broadcast, or that podcasts became a thing.
Oh yeah, podcasts.
That people decided I can have a podcast. Yeah.
I mean, podcast has knocked broadcast radio on its heels. I mean,
and when I started my first podcast, Marketing Monday, in 2005, there was there were 500 podcasts in the directory.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing?
Can I tell you how many there were last week?
How many?
920,000.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that funny? Like, I figured out.
Well, not exactly. It might have been 930,000.
Right. Who knows?
Yeah. So, and first of all, because there's no bandwidth restrictions.
Right.
Radio, there's bandwidth restriction. There's only so much frequency.
You can only reach as far as you can reach. Yes.
Yeah. We're doing global radio right now, and it's virtually free.
That's right.
And I don't know how you're sitting, but I got one leg over the arm of the chair as I'm doing this. And I'm just looking at the bowl of oatmeal I finished. I'm just...
Well, this is great. I'm in my reading room, just lounging in my... I have the Manhattan Club chair from Pottery Barn. They're my favorite chairs, so I have a lot of them, but I'm sitting in one of them right now, looking up.
And if anybody out there listening, they can order from Pottery Barn today, and because the highways are basically empty, it'll be delivered in record time.
I'm telling you, it is the perfect chair for sitting, reading, journaling, that kind of thing, because it has just the right amount of depth and just the right back slope, and the arms are just the right height. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of these, down from a high of 12 of these.
Wow!
So, there you go. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow! Yeah. So, can I tell you about my whopper in digital land?
Tell me.
Stephen Palter, who you know well.
I do.
Stephen, I think about 10 days ago in New York, they closed down all non-essential medical facilities. And Stephen is an IVF doctor, one of the top-rated IVF doctors in the world. Okay, and there are government statistics to actually prove his success rate. And but over the last 10 years, I would say, but certainly Babs and I have been working with him on this project, probably goes back 5 or 6 years anyway. And what he's created is an amazing platform called Lodestone. And Lodestone, the word Lodestone, is a medieval word for a British Anglo-Saxon word for a magnet. Mm-hmm. So Lodestone is the magnet. And the whole point is that he's created this platform, and it combines marketing capability, it combines artificial intelligence capability, and then conferencing capability and chatting capability, language analysis capability. And, it's all archived, it's recorded, the sound is recorded, the video is recorded. And he did it for a specific purpose, and that was that he felt that being a member of a medical specialty in the medical profession, he didn't have any way of knowing what all the other doctors in the world that did what he did, which is help other men's husbands have babies. That's quite a specialized medical thing. And so he created this platform called Lodestone, and right off the bat, every quarter for about 90 minutes, he could talk to 2,000 other doctors who are frontline practitioners, and it got up to about 46 countries. And then he would send out reports, and all of a sudden, at the same time, there were these firewalls that the U.S. government, anyway, put in about what pharmaceutical companies and medical technology companies could do as far as, ingratiating themselves to doctors. And they cut off, golf tournaments, they cut off cruises, they cut off resort stays and everything. And and all of a sudden the pharmaceutical companies, the technology companies say, hey, can we be in on your talks? And he said, well, you can be, he thought about it. And he said, well, you can be observers, but you can't take part in it. You can't take part in it. You can pay for an observer place in the event. And he said, and you can buy a sponsorship, which will give you the results of the thinking that goes on in these. And he did it. And then, but he wasn't getting, the market wasn't ready for it yet. Okay. And during that time, Babs and I convinced him to go to Silicon Valley, get the best IP lawyer he could, and get 100% ownership of his platform, because he did it within the framework of kind of like the academic world. And it's a very, very murky world about who owns what. When you create something new, who owns what? And I said, I'm going to tell you right now that you're going to create something really valuable here, and you're not going to have any proof that you own it. So start the process. And he had, he paid for this whole thing out of his own pocket. It was all his time. And he's quite handy technologically, so he can put things together. So anyway, 10 days ago, we get a phone call from him, and he says, I think it's time to see what our virtual tool will do right now, because all the IVF doctors in the United States and in some of the other countries are being shut down, and they have patients, who have no patience. And anyway, on Thursday night, he does his first one, and this is with OBGYN doctors, so these are birthing doctors and, early childhood doctors. And the doctors who take over when you are pregnant, they're the OBGYN. And he had 2,200 on, and they were talking about, is it safe? Is it safe for your babies? Is it safe for the mother? Is it safe for the father and everything else? And they have this conversation. And his AI program, he does a survey beforehand, and the survey determines which subjects the majority of sign-up people want to talk about. And then he gets specialists who come in. And so the big thing, he had two doctors from Ground Zero in China, in Wuhan, I think it is. Wuhan, Ground Zero in China, who came on and talked about how they're handling the situation with the virus, and OBGYN, top OBGYN doctor in China, a woman. And then had one from Italy, northern Italy, one from southern Italy, and had one from Ground Zero in New York City. Yeah, it was just fascinating. But 15 minutes before he went on this event, the White House calls and said, we'd like to have our key task force person be able to be on. Can you include her? And they said, sure. And they said, but they couldn't, because they had to have the Secret Service and everything clear a line in that would actually work. And they did it in 10 minutes. And so the next night he did it with IVF doctors, because there's a real protest on the part of IVF doctors right now that, about this closing down. And, they have completely separate clinics. So it's not like people are going to be in danger zones and everything else. And so it's a big issue. Are we using, supplies and services that could be devoted to the virus? So it was a big, and he said, we're going to be nice to each other here, but at a certain point, it got very, very heated, and it was just first rate. I mean, I'm not calling it entertainment, but it was just captivating, right. And this is all recorded. And then the White House calls him afterwards, and they say, can you get us the actual language analysis of what actually people were saying on the chat room, because we want to have a sense of how this is being approached. And usually it's about a 2-week process before you can finish it. And they said, could you have it by 8:00 tomorrow morning? This is 7:00 Eastern time in the evening. Could you have it in 11 hours from now? And Stephen says, oh, sure, we can have it. So they had it yesterday morning. And about an hour after that, the chief person of getting government contracts phones him up from the White House, or as a result of a phone call from the White House, and they say, do you need any funding to keep this series going? He says, I'm going to tell you how we can get you some funds right away. What you're doing is unique in the country. Nobody else can do what you're doing. And the White House just wants to put major funding behind you. And then the pharma companies are phoning, and everybody's phoning, and then other specialties. So he's going to do live events for probably upwards of 10 to 20 specialties, each practice, as they're relating to the general geopolitical issue of the virus, the economic issue of the virus. And he's out there. He's the only one. I have to tell you, he is the total buyer here. Okay. Yeah. He's the total buyer here. And so I've been going back and forth with him. And I said, now, every self-protecting bureaucrat in the world is going to want to either control what you're doing or stop what you're doing. So you got to be on the alert. You got to have your antenna, your spidey sense out right now about who you want to work with and who you want to work with. And but it's kind of interesting because on Thursday, the first event was in the evening at 7 o'clock. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, his worldwide patent came through from the 5 works of IP. So
perfect timing.
His worldwide patent, and he's 100% owner of the platform. And he was so excited because God, he sweated blood to create this capability. Right. But here again, there's nothing more powerful in the world than no more disruptive force. So he's getting phone calls. I mean, he just gave me an update about 10 different, very, very, very influential people from all sorts. And, how do we become part of this? And Babs and I just launched it. We just gave him a check to do at least 2 of the events. We just wrote a check for him. And we said, we're just supporters, we're just going to support you, sponsors. Yeah. We're not investors, we're not donors, we're nothing. And he said, well, I don't have any legal work set up. And I said, do you have a bank account? Is your company incorporated? Is Lodestone Incorporated? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you have a bank account? And I said, yeah. And I said, it's revenues.
Revenues. Yes, exactly.
It's revenues. Revenues just came up, and I said, and everybody who gives you money over the next month with us, it's revenue. It's not an investment. It's not a donation. It's just revenue. You got a hot number, and just go with it. So anyway, it's been so exciting, and his registration for Free Zone came through, so he's in Free Zone now. So he's one of ours, Dean. He's one of ours.
I love it. I can't wait. This is great.
Yeah. So that's mine. But this would not have been. It would not have been possible 2 weeks ago. What's happening to him would not have been possible 2 weeks ago.
Right on.
Now, how many hundreds of other capabilities that have been sitting on the back burner until this moment are now coming forward?
Now there's a thing, but now there's a pent-up audience that with a new capability. And I think, you look at this, the number of households that are virtual gathering enabled now on the back of their kids being set up for virtual classrooms, so many.
And by the way, can I give you a kudo? And it comes from Norm Dunnigan in Aiken, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And you gave him like a minute's worth of insight that he has a restaurant, Whiskey Alley, and that, which was closed down because all such establishments are closed down right now, but that he could provide food staples because he has a completely different supply chain than the supermarkets did. So he he's got the contact information of all of his customers. And he just said, no. He says, you need flour? I got flour. You need eggs? I got eggs. You need, I mean, think of a restaurant, a full-service restaurant, and how many different, and his suppliers are delighted because every other restaurant is cutting them off. I said, just keep the stuff moving through. We got, he said, and he's just selling at retail. So anyway, he said, I talked to him yesterday, and he said he's up to 75% normal business just because of your suggestions. So there you go, Dean.
Well, that's great.
And he and Tony Caldwell, two zoners, are going to start a virtual cocktail hour. And so you have to bring a imbibable liquid of your choice, and you have to share with other people of what you're drinking. Everybody can drink what they want to drink, and they have to have good news.
For the simultaneous sip.
It's like the simultaneous sip.
That's exactly right. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, we had I did a podcast, the More Cheese, Less Whiskers podcast with a client who owns a restaurant in Georgia, and not unlike Norman's. And they've switched to doing home-style meals. They're a Cajun restaurant, so they're doing gumbo and jambalaya and things that can be served over rice that are staples, and big hit. It's a big hit.
And they're better the second day than the first day.
Yeah, right.
No, yeah, they're better. I mean, all that stuff that's spicy when it's at you've eaten, you did the first serving, but you had leftovers. I have to tell you, the second day, they're always better.
Yeah, when it marinates, it's got time to percolate or whatever you call it.
Yeah, marinates anyway. Yeah. One of our favorite restaurants here in the beaches, our part of Toronto. Great. It's kind of a French, neighborhood French restaurant, and they just went immediately to take out. But the interesting thing is they can do it at any time of the day. They can do it at any time of the day, and they're usually closed. They don't open until 5:00 at night, but they can do takeout any time during the day. And then you have to phone in. You can't come and knock on the door. You have to phone in, and you have to give them the credit card to pay for the meal. Yep. And then it's waiting for you when you get there. They say, come by at this hour, and it's waiting for you. And
so good.
Yeah, and people are getting exercise. They're bringing it home, and Well, I was thinking of your ghost just before we were saying that your ghost kitchen. Can you imagine what it's like for those ghost kitchens right now? I mean, perfect. They're perfectly set up, including the biggest thing is no traffic congestion.
Yes. I think everything. There's so many implications for this of what's gonna be better, but amazing.
I tell you, truckers are cultural heroes these days. Hollywood celebrities, not so much, but truckers are. A lot of celebrities are told when you self-isolate yourself, just don't talk to us. We're not interested in your views. And so it's very, very interesting. The celebrity culture is taking a real hit now because no one really wants to know their political leanings or their social.
David Geffen tweeting out his best wishes for everyone's safety from his yacht in the Grenadines. Nobody really cares. But stock people, who are keeping the shelves full, and cashiers and delivery people and everything else, they're sort of cultural heroes right now. I love it.
All right,
Major.
Yes. I got to say, with one, I have to tell you this right now because we're in the field, and that with one successful breakthrough booklet, breakthrough blueprint, breakthrough blueprint. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Under your belt, you are now officially a field commission major.
Oh my goodness! What an honor.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Greatest moment. And it happened right here.
It happened right here, yeah. And remember, this doesn't, these commissions, field commissions don't last beyond the extent of the combat.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Okay. But if you can monetize the promotion, the cash flow will continue afterwards.
Okay, perfect. That's good. Well, Dan, I will see you next time, same time.
Same time. I'm here. I'm here.
I love
here.
It.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Dan. Bye.